How do you think the emotional temperature of college fairs have changed? What different anxieties and hopes did you find surfacing from families?
I found it amazing. When you would ask students what they're interested in studying, they have clearly been asked this question a million times already. Where are you going to college? What are you going to study? And so I think that notion of saying, I'm not sure, or I don't know, I think they very much feel that's not an appropriate answer. It's like they have to have an answer. I really want to be a neonatal oncologist, or I really want to do a degree in psychology, but I like to do a minor in public health and anthropology. I would be like, okay, that's really specific. So the level of kind of specificity that I heard, I could tell it was because they'd been hammered with this question over and over, and there's an expectation that they should have an answer.
Hello, humans. We are here for the Vine Down. I'm Emily Smith, your host. I'm joined today by Brent Gage, who's the AVP of Enrollment Management at the University of Iowa. Dr. Brent Gage, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, Emily.
And Brent, you and I met AcroSem 2023, so happy anniversary to us.
True, that's right, in Seattle.
Yes, we have spent this whole last year as friends, which I have super appreciated. And just really thrilled to have just such a badass of enrollment management on the show today for a really interesting topic. Brent, you had some interesting journeys this fall that not all folks in your position have had. And I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about why you found yourself going to college fairs this fall.
Yes, in the wild world of admissions, one has to pivot once in a while. And as often happens, as travel season comes around, you have some staff turnover, and the ability to get the positions filled and get somebody good in there that knows what they're talking about sometimes takes a little longer than we would like. And so we had some travel planned. We just hadn't assigned it. And when we went to assign it, there was nobody left to take it. And so I said, much to the shock of my staff, I said, I'll go do those college fairs and high school visits in Ohio. And they said, oh, okay. And the rest is history. And so I spent a few days in Ohio visiting high schools and doing drop-offs and college fairs. And so it was the first time I had done that in a very long time.
How long do you think it's been?
I tried to hearken back, and I think it was the last time I actually did a college fair was 2012.
Okay, so more than 10 years.
More than 10 years.
Okay. First of all, did your feet hurt as much as they did more than 10 years ago?
I don't remember my feet hurting before, but I was certainly happy to get back to my hotel and take my shoes off after the fair. Gym floors are not kind.
The best feeling in the world. They are not. And I'm curious, okay, so how did returning to these fairs challenge your assumptions about what today's students want to know? You went in thinking students really care about this, and now you're like, wait, now I've been among the people. How did it change your assumptions?
Well, I thought the biggest thing would be, they have more information in their pocket than I had in my library at my high school. And so my assumption was these students will be really advanced in understanding higher ed and college, and they're not. So I think that was one of the assumptions that I think I had made is that they're going to come with really a lot of background information and because of tools like College Vine and all the other sources of information that are out there at their disposal. And they were this lot of the same questions that were clearly not very well researched. And that's okay. That's why we're there, just to help them out. So that was really one of the biggest things that I thought I would be answering much more kind of sophisticated questions. And while there were some, most of them were questions like, is your psychology program any good? And I still don't know really how to answer that question very well. But at the same time, that was probably the biggest takeaway, because again, I think I have two kids in college right now, and having gone through the search process with them, I felt like they were pretty in tune to a lot of things that I would have never thought about when I was going through that.
Well, your kids are also consuming your job at home, right? Your kids are in a slightly different spot. You told me a story
They have a couple cheat codes, maybe.
Maybe. But you told me a funny story about moving your one son into University of New Mexico and like the help that came to take over and moving stuff in and out of his dorm room. Um, so do you think that's generational? Do you think that's like students who experienced a big interruption via COVID? Do you think that's like generational laziness? Like, why do you think the students that you encountered in your high school visits just felt underinformed? Or do you think it was just like your expectations, you just sort of assumed like, oh, society is marching on, so must students be, and then you sort of found that they hadn't been?
Yeah, I really think it was me making an assumption
Mm,
because there's so much information available. And just because information is available doesn't mean it's being consumed, as we all know, right? And so I think, taking that step back to say, these are young people who are trying to figure out something they've never experienced before. And so from their perspective, all the information in the world, it's still something they're talking about that they've never really done or experienced. So I think it was more my assumption, um, than them not being where they probably should appropriately be in the thought process.
yeah, understand. What conversations do you think surprised you the most? So when you were like out live having the conversations, what felt the most surprising, or what questions did you get that you were not expecting to hear aside from like, is your psychology program good?
The one thing, Emily, that did surprise me that I got asked very frequently was, "What's your acceptance rate?" And that was not a question I anticipated hearing from, but it was a very common one. And it was interesting because the schools that were around me at the one college fair, I had a very selective school next to me and basically an open enrollment school on the other side. And so the three of us, when we would get to ask that questions, we were giving very different answers. And the students kind of understood that. And when they heard 15% acceptance rate, they were like, "Oh, this isn't a school for me." When they heard 85, they were like, "Oh, okay." And when they heard 100, they were like, 100? So, but that was a question that surprised me. I had never been asked that question at a college fair before. And at both of the college fairs I did, I probably got asked that 50 times.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something we naturally observe on, the millions of students who are on College Vine. They spend a lot of time, like whether we like it or not, they spend a lot of time using like the chancing module on their profiles on College Vine. And I think it's this like the advent of like you apply to more schools. I follow applying to college, the subreddit on Reddit, and I like sort of observe these students talking to each other about schools, and they spend a ton of time talking about whether they're going to get in, and it feels like a really big, I don't know, source of anxiety for them. And I'm curious, like, okay, so now that you know that's like a thing that students really care about, do you think you're going to change any part of your messaging, the way you train your counselors to talk about it or answer that question? Like, what do you think the happy path is for students who ask that question? Like, what should we meet them with ideally?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of students are under the assumption college is really hard to get into.
Hmm.
Like it's like, oh, you almost have to get lucky to get into college. And I would say that there are some schools, certainly that's the case, but it's the vast minority of colleges and universities. So for us, I think if we're going to talk about our acceptance rate, we have an 85% acceptance rate at the University of Iowa, and we're an AAU Big Ten school. And we're really proud of it because not only do we accept 85% of our students, but 90% of them stay and are retained. And so not only are we focused on giving you an opportunity to access higher ed, but we're really into making sure you're successful. And if you can do both of those things, I think that sends a really good message to students. We're not just letting students in to let them in. We're letting them in because we think we can make you be successful here.
Yeah. So if that was like a whole arc of questions that you received at those schools, what do you have any like outlying weird questions that you were asked?
I did get asked by a few folks that I'm going to assume are not going to be geography majors when they asked me where Iowa was.
Oh, that's nice.
I had to think about it. I'm like, okay, well, Ohio's here, Illinois is here. We're on the other side, So um, I I didn't expect that one, but okay, that's good. I also had a student who came up and said, I really love the university. I think it's great. And I was in the Columbus area. So people know Iowa because of, there's some brand equity because we're, being close to Ohio State. Um, and I could have a student come up and goes, I have a lot of varied interests. And I said, well, that's great. We have 224 programs of study. I'm sure we could have you, get you set up and some you'd be really excited about. I said, so what are you interested in? She said, well, I'm interested in architecture. I was like, oh, we don't have architecture. What else?
You're like, how about
Well,
engineering?
she said, well, I'm kind of into fashion design. I'm like, yeah, we also don't have fashion design. She goes, but I like science too. And so, I'm also interested in veterinary. I'm like, I'm out. You just struck me out. I'm 0 for 3.
It's like that show where you get the 3 X's from the
Right.
passenger to the chairs turn
Right.
around. Okay, so how did you end it in the spirit of authenticity and because we all care about closing the guidance gap. How did you really end that conversation with the student? Did you say I don't have anything for you, but you could check out these other schools? How did you really end it in real life with her? Because that's a tough breakup conversation because you want to be open and welcoming, but
Right. I mean, the big thing is I told her, especially with veterinary, I said, really, you can get your degree in anything as long as you take the prerequisite courses to apply to a veterinary program. And so really you can do that anywhere. I said, and also I explained where a land grant school was and why they are most typically going to have veterinary type programs because of their agriculture portion of the program. And so I said, for example, in your state, here would be the land grants. Here's the ones in Illinois, and so those may be some places to look. So yeah, I mean, again, who knows? And like most students, it's not like that. If she's got those 3, veterinary, fashion design, and architecture, that's quite a combo. So she's probably going to change her mind 15 times before she ever gets to her sophomore year.
Right. How do you think the emotional temperature of college fairs have changed? So from the time that you last recruited actively on the ground 10 years ago or 12 years ago, what different anxieties and hopes did you find surfacing from families?
I found it amazing that when you would ask students what they're interested in studying, they have clearly been asked this question a million times already. Where are you going to college? What are you going to study? And so I think that notion of saying, I'm not sure, or I don't know, I think they very much feel that's not an appropriate answer. It's like they have to have an answer, So, I really want to be a neonatal oncologist, or I really want to do a degree in psychology, but I like to do a minor in public health and anthropology. I would be like, okay, that's really specific. But as I've had kids in high school, it is amazing when they interact with adults as they get to close to their senior year. The first question every adult asks them is, well, you decide where to go to college. What are you going to study? And it becomes a little bit of grind that if you don't have an answer, you feel like you're missing out. So the level of kind of specificity that I heard, I could tell it was because they've been hammered with this question over and over, and there's an expectation that they should have an answer.
What do you think the better question is? And you can think about this too as a dad. What is the better question we should be asking students as we meet them? Because you're right. I remember that feeling, especially this time of year, or around the holidays. And I remember being a senior in high school and just feeling okay, I'm going into battle mode. I got to say, what I want to study and have that story ready. What do you think the ideal question we should be asking students at this stage as we get to know them is?
Well, I think it would be much more interesting, or you'd be showing much more interest in a person if you ask them about what they're really passionate about, what they're really interested in, not what job do you want, because again, the job stuff will take care of itself if you do something you really love, right? And I think that's sometimes how students get tracked into programs that they think they want, because I heard you can get a really good job if you do X, even though they're not very interested in that. And I think we help condition students to think that way because we constantly ask them, what are you going to major in? And I will tell you, having a son who's an English philosophy major, having an adult say, what are you going to major in? And he would say English and philosophy. And they'd say, well, what are you going to do with that? And it's like, but if he would have said nursing, would they have said that? No, right? So that's the one pressure I could certainly I could certainly feel in these students is there's this great expectation they have to have it all figured out. And it's really unfair.
Well, and that's, like, so American of us, right? Like, I think about the way I meet adults. Like, if I'm at a cocktail party, I really try hard not to say, like, "What do you do for work?" if I'm getting to know somebody. Like, the question that I try to adopt is like, "Hey, what do you like, nice to meet you. What are you into?" And you might tell like, you, Brent, might tell me a story about, like, flock of seagulls and playing tennis, but if I asked you, like, what you did for work, you'd tell me a story about enrollment, and I think you get to know it's, like, a different quality of getting to know a person.
But truth be known, I could still work as a flock of seagulls interpreter. And
Oh,
yeah,
I know. We hope this for you. We hope this is your future.
it's my fingers are crossed.
Second act, man. Why not? Okay, so you've been on the ground now. Like, what do you think you learned from being out in the world doing this thing that you wouldn't have gotten if you just stayed inside in your office in Iowa?
Well, first and foremost, Strive Scan is like my favorite thing ever.
It just feels like magic.
It's like magic, but think how much time we used to spend when kids would sit at your table and fill out these contact cards that were ineligible. I mean, you couldn't even read these things. And then someone had to go try to enter them. So I think the nice thing about the Strive Scan process is you get to have a lot more in-depth conversations with people because you're not spending so much time on all this.
You're not watching the
busy work.
inquiry card fill out. Yeah.
Right. So I love that. And then the fact that they just get uploaded, I mean, I was quite excited about that because, back in my day it would be like, get out your pencil. Let's get all your information.
Get out your pencil, fill out the cards, and then you come home to your hotel room with the stack of cards. And then there's this, like, how long does it take to do the data entry on the cards? Or do you wait until the trip is over to enter the cards later? And then then we completely lost track with the student because it's been like 30 days.
Right. I think the other thing and we've talked about this, but it's just amazing as you walk around a college fair and they all have these taglines and it's just the sea of sameness. It's like where education meets truth, where young people become the unicorns they're going to be. It's like, what are you talking about? And, I think this generation, Gen Z, is so advertised to all the time that you can just see it doesn't work for them. They're not buying it.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a common topic in this show. We talk a lot about authenticity and talk about, like, like colleges being who they are and being their whole sort of institutional selves, talking about who they are and who they're not. Like, do you feel like you do that well at the University of Iowa? Stand in your authenticity institutionally?
As to the extent we can.
Say more about that because I think what I'm intuiting is, like, because you're so big, because you're the flagship, like, how do you do that at your size in your place?
Well, I mean, I think the big thing is are there 20 institutions in the country that are a lot like us? Yeah, absolutely, there are. So what's the value proposition, right? And what makes us unique? And so, I think we focus on one, we have an acceptance rate of 85%, but yet we're an AAU Big Ten Research One university with a 90% retention rate. The second thing is, we're the top public writing university in the country. And so when you come here, I don't care if you're going to be a nurse, an engineer, it doesn't matter. You are going to write, and we're going to make your writing skills something that you're going to leave with in a way that's really unique. Because what's the number one thing employers say they need from the people they hire? They've got to be able to communicate. And that could be verbally, it can be certainly in writing. So we really pride ourselves on that. And there's not a lot of universities that are out there kind of leading with that, kind of in the way that we are. And we can back it up with, a top, creative writing program, a top, the Writers Workshop, which is internationally known. We're in the UNESCO World City of Literature in Iowa City. We're one of 2 in North America. So, I mean, I think that's one of the things that we really lean into.
Yeah, I mean, that was very known to me as an English major myself, who I thought, I wanted to teach at the college level. When I was in college, I thought I wanted to get a PhD in literature and continue to do that and potentially get into more creative writing. And you all were certainly on my radar, but then I got hooked by Enrollment, couldn't stop. Now my dreams of becoming a writer have died.
If you move to Iowa City, everyone's working on a novel. So you fit right in.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Well, maybe I'll make like the Vine Down the novel instead of Vine Down podcast. Okay, it scales so well. Wait, I want to dig into this writing thing, which is not really the topic of the show, but I do want to dig into the writing thing because I kind of view the advent of AI a little bit like calculators, right? Like calculators, like it's not as important for me to be a good mental mathematician. And you, Brent, know this about me that I'm really terrible at math. In fact, once you told me that I should never do math in public, it was like the least friendly thing you've ever said to me. So given that I am a person that should never do math in public and I always have a calculator with me, I feel a little bit like that with AI, or I'm wondering if AI is heading in this direction where like it's not as important that you're a good writer because we can have AI write for us. And I'm not saying that AI like is the thing that delivers final product writing. I don't want anyone to hear me say that. But I do think AI is really a helpful thought partner, really helpful for first drafts, really helpful with like mechanically correct writing. AI is really actually good at that. Generative AI creates writing that is technically correct. And I'm curious if the institution has thought at all about the changes that may happen in sort of this AI driven world about like how important writing is or how important communication is. Like, have you thought institutionally about shifting that into like, yeah, we're going to teach you how to think, write, be really good writers. And also, we're going to really teach you how to prompt AI well so that you get good writing output out of it. Like, are those conversations happening for you institutionally?
Absolutely. I mean, again, AI is a tool. And if you have a tool that's got great utility, how do you leverage that to make what you're already doing even better? And again, but AI, just because it's a tool that we have, it, it doesn't make everything a nail if it's a hammer, right?
Yes,
It's
yes.
something that you use in conjunction with other skills to hone, refine, and continue to build your craft. Because again, if you're structurally not a very good writer and you lean too far into AI, you're not going to have very good writing, right? You're it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same. But if you're a really good writer and you have these tools, then your ability to communicate is only going to be more effective. So yeah, I think it's part of it now.
Yeah, and you're pointing out that there's like it's not just like we we make you into a good writer, but it's the sort of building blocks of what makes a good writer, right? Which is like organizing your thoughts, making a clear argument. Like all of these things will be important and continue to be important as folks use AI sort of in the working world. Yeah, that's really interesting because the Iowa brand, really hangs its hat on that and does that really well. And I know that it's important to the institution to be, really innovative too. So back to this like Brent as counselor Brent, and I'm curious like when you switched from like VP mode into counselor mode, what aspects of enrollment management like now look different from given that you were like on the ground level? Like if you think about your counseling staff now looking at you, the decisions that you make, the priorities that you set, the systems that you implement, like what seems different?
Yeah, I think there's two things, and we've talked about one of these, but I'm really struck how the way students used to sort colleges, right? In your head, you have to kind of try to figure out how to sort all this information. And I think for a long time, they would say, oh, you're a large public. Oh, you're a small private. Oh, you're a 2-year or you're a 4-year. You're an urban, you're a rural, right? I don't think students do that anymore. They're much more thinking about the way information is constantly presented to them on the channels in which they live, in which things are ranked, right? Which shelf do you belong in? Oh, you're a Big Ten. Oh, you're on this shelf. Oh, you're maybe a regional or directional school. Oh, you're on this shelf over here. But it's not how are they different? It's this ordering of things. And so for some students, they've kind of determined this is the shelf I'm looking for, but you have to qualify to be on that shelf because that's the only shelf they're really going to look at. And to me, that was just it was a different way of thinking about it than it used to be. And so, how do we make it really easy for students to understand what we are and what we aren't? Because I think that's what they're trying to discern. And I know that a lot of the students that are using your tool right now, whether they're using that or niche or topics or any of those tools, what they're trying to do is they're trying to find this thing they're looking for, but they don't quite know how to do that. And so like tools like yours help that considerably. I'm looking for a public school. I want it to be about this big. Like, this is where kind of the setting. Okay, now I got a hold of 20 schools that fit that bill. Now I can really start to look deeper.
So hold number 2 in your head because I want to dig in on number 1. So if you learn that, like if you're observing to me, if I reflect that back to you, like there's a difference in discernment of like students bucketing colleges together, like in terms of getting to a yes or no, that's becoming more like rank order related. Like, what will you go do with that information or observation? Like, you now in your seat can actually take that and say, like, okay, we could potentially change how we talk about who we are, who we're not. Like, how will you action that learning?
And that's number 2.
Aha.
Segue. The number 2 is we have a grave misconception that students understand when we talk about the size of our institution. When I say we have 33,000 students, is that big? Is that small? Is that they don't know.
It's larger than the town I live in, so okay, yes.
Right, but are we anywhere near the same size as Ohio State? No, not even close, right?
Right.
So if we say an enrollment of 32,000 or 10,000, whatever your enrollment is, I think you've got to do better than that. You've got to contextualize what that means, right? So for example, if Purdue has an incoming class of 10,000 students, we have an incoming class of 5,200. I think a student can go, oh, okay. They'll understand that. But when we say our enrollment is 32,000, whatever, I don't think they have any idea what that means, And is 32,000 big? It is until you hear somebody say that they're 50,000. And then you hear somebody that say that they're 1,000. Some students might think that's big. So I think we need to do a better job of helping students to understand how size is relative across the continuum of higher education, because the way we're talking about it now, they don't understand it.
Are there other items that you would put in that category of like things that need to be contextualized better? Like size is one, but are there other things that you think of in that same line?
I think that this hang up on major, we've gone way out there with that. I mean, this notion that I'm going to come to college and I'm going to take courses in areas and things that I'm interested in, and over time it's going to land me somewhere where I really want to be. I mean, this notion of no, I have to have a major, I have to have 2 minors, I have to have all this all decided by the time I go to orientation in the summer. I think we do students a huge disservice because, again, sometimes they're going to get too far down the track on that path. And by the time they realize they don't want to do that, now they're going to have to do a U-turn. And sometimes that's going to really minimize what they're going to have as far as flexibility. And dual credit is not helping this problem. When you have a student coming in with 26 credit hours, all of a sudden now they're taking junior level courses. And are they prepared for those courses? 1. And 2, when you're that far into it, it's hard to make that U-turn.
Yeah. And I'm hearing you like hearken back again for that like messaging that like it's okay to go to college to find yourself, and it's okay to use your college experience to locate, a job, an outcome, a trajectory in your life. And also students and the data of this generation of students is also like fairly outcomes oriented, right? Like schools are moving towards a place where they're talking about the outcome. And I think we are as the industry, like fighting around like a decreased positive sentiment about higher education, right? Just the value of higher education in the country. And you and I, of course, because we're like products of it, we work inside of it. You don't have to make that argument to us. Like, how do we do those 2 things at once? Like allow for come to college and find yourself. And also like I matter, college matters, higher education matters, and outcomes will happen if you come here. Like, how do we hold those 2 things at the same time?
Well, I think we have to treat it as though it's not a fork in the road. Are you going to choose your vocation, or are you going to choose, kind of becoming an educated person and exploring lots of things? We need to articulate the great thing about college is if you're really worried about getting a job after college, we're going to make sure you do that. And while you're doing that, you're going to have an opportunity to do a lot of amazing things in conjunction to just that path that when you get done is going to make you even more employable, but also will spur on a lot of things that you'll take with you for the rest of your life. So I don't think we need to say we're about outcomes and jobs or we're about finding yourself. I think we need to say this is really about achieving all of those things that are on that bucket list, and you can do them all here, and this is how.
Any other stories or moments from the road that like has you rethinking any of your institutional recruitment strategies? Like anything that you're coming like as you were on the plane home going like, okay, I gotta remember this feeling because I want to see it play out here.
Yeah, it's when the students would come up, I would show them the list of majors. What are you interested in? The list of majors was king because they wanted to look and find themselves. And a big thing I noticed there is we assume that students understand what a college is. Oh, I want to study biology. It's in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. They don't know what that is. Iowa's the college. So when we speak through our publications and print stuff, we should speak their language, not ours. Now, when a parent would come up, I would turn it to Hawkeyes get jobs, and we have a 96% placement rate because that's what parents' question is. And so, again, it's trying to bring those two things together because, parents have such a huge influence now. And I was a little shocked at the number of parents that came to my table, and there was no student. The student didn't even bother to come. They just sent a parent, and they were going table to table, asking questions, gathering information. There was a number of those at both of the fairs I was at.
Okay, I have a question that's like purely curious. Did you try to be like, oh, I'm Brent, I'm a recruiter. And did you also try like, I'm Dr. Gage, I'm the boss of the whole GD thing? Like, did you try both ways and did you settle out on a persona to be in this moment?
No, I have a high school daughter who's a junior, and so if I was like, I'm Dr. Gage, I'm here to, they would have
McKenna would be like, Dad, no.
yeah, they'd have been like, hard stop, no. So my name tag says enrollment management. They don't know what that is. So I just said I work at the University of Iowa. So
Not even with the parents? You didn't like try to be the boss of the parents?
no, not really. No, I wouldn't. So it was funny at the little luncheon they have before the college fair. I'd be sitting there with all these reps and they're like, oh, so you work in Iowa? I'm like, yeah. Are you an admissions person? I said, well, yeah, I work with admissions. And they go, what do you mean you work with admissions? Well, I'm the VP for enrollment management. And they're like,
I'm the boss.
and they're like, why are you here? And I said, that's happy to help out.
Yeah, did you get asked to go for like beers after the fair? Like, did you get rolled into any of like the counselor camaraderie that like definitely still happens or no?
Not really my demographic. So, and after standing for 4 hours on a gym floor, no, I'm good. So, but it was so funny to hear him talk though, because a few of them were like, my boss would never do this. Or, oh man, I'm just trying to picture our VP out at a college fair. And they would, I was like, yeah, I know your VP. So I'll mention that to him next time I see him.
Yeah, like I can picture you rolling in there like whatever that movie is with Steve Buscemi where he's like, hello, fellow youths. Like, in that moment. Okay, related question. How did being like a road warrior influence your perspective on work-life balance for your admissions team? Because in general, admissions counselors are tired, burnt out, unhappy. Nobody joins the profession to like do a lot of reports. Like, tell me about your perspective or any new perspectives on work-life balance for your team.
So it's hard work, and I did it for 4 days. They do it for, 8, 10, 12 weeks. And travel season is hard. And so one of the things I'm really proud of that we do at Iowa is when we close the semester, we also shut down our tour program. We shut down everything. And we tell those folks, you can work remote. You need to take some time and recharge. And I think after, just a crazy, because they're traveling 4 days a week. They're visiting high schools, doing college fairs. Then they come back to campus on Friday, and we have 700 visitors at one of our visit programs. So it's never stops. And so I think being able to have some time for them to decompress is really important. But it has to be meaningful time. I mean, they need to have days where they're not on the phone. They're not, taking calls. They just need time to kind of get back and rest up. And so I know I did after my 4 days. So, but yeah, I mean, and it really reminds you how valuable they are and how hard they work, and how, we're doing a lot of good. Even if that student doesn't come, we're still helping students understand a process that's very foreign to them. And, I think that's an important role as well.
Anything you learned about sort of the current state of like the perception of colleges or the work of college counseling that isn't showing up in usual reports, data, the news? Like, is there anything that you observed that just we're not talking about that we should be?
I went to a couple of the high schools I visited. They have really, really good counseling staffs. And you could tell that they had good counseling staffs by talking to the kids.
Public high schools?
One public, one private.
Okay.
You could just really tell, because, there was other schools where it was just a different level, right? And so I think the role of the college counselor is really important to help these students navigate. And I also think that just because of the national rhetoric, these are kids who are very concerned about debt. They've heard all these stories, and they're really worried about debt because they ask a lot of questions about cost and do you have to borrow, and, beyond just do you have scholarships and how much is it? And they're really attuned to, you got to be careful with this whole borrowing thing, which I think isn't all bad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an interesting thing, especially when we look at, the typical high school guidance counselor has a caseload of like 500 students, and they're trying to do all these things in one job. It's a lot. And to sort of be the steward of educating a big number of students about all of those things, that like plays into the sentiment of higher education, right? That like, what's the point if it's just going to get me, further along in debt? Like, what's the point? Why should I trust this institution? Why should I go for it? And we all mutually own solving that problem. Like, I think we talk about it at College Mind a lot. I think the college side folks that I'm close with talk about it a lot. And I know it's what, high school counselors are really working really, really hard on.
Well, I do have one story that you'll truly appreciate.
Yes. Hit me.
I get to this very first college fair. It was a Sunday afternoon, and they had a parking lot right next to the building for us, people directing us. So I get there, and one of their student ambassadors comes up and says, "Do you need help carrying in any materials?" I said, "Well, sure. Can you kick this box?" Okay. Picks up this box. So we're walking, and he's like, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Well, the University of Iowa." So we were talking a little bit, and then he says, I said, "Well, I really appreciate you doing this. This is great." He goes, "No, it's okay. They told us there would be some older folks that would be at the fair." So, and this kid's like a freshman in high school, kind of a little, not quite got everything figured out yet. But yeah, they told us there might be some older people coming to the fair. So I'm happy to help. I'm like, oh, it's talking about me. So
what a dagger.
No, yeah, well, it was refreshing.
You should have just like stretched out on your face in the parking lot. Like, "Can you also carry me in? I'm so ancient. That I can't possibly move my body into this building."
But nice kid. I'm sure his intentions were
future Hawkeye.
Coated in gold.
I mean, maybe though, maybe then by like the class of 2027, incoming class 2027, you really are over-indexing on like authentic honesty, and maybe he's a great fit for you.
We'll see.
We don't know.
It's worth a shot.
Well, Brent, thank you so much for having us on the show. Where can folks find you? Like, where do you hang out?
I'm on the socials. I as much as I can be. But no, I'm a senior consultant with Acro Consulting, so I do a lot of work at different campuses, helping them out with different channels. And again, I like to attend the big events that are out there just to meet folks like you and network with my colleagues and find out what's the latest of the latest and figure out how we can keep improving and doing things better.
That's the name of the game. Well, Brent Gage, thanks so much for being on the show this week. We appreciate your time, and folks, we'll see you back next time.